To buy your first home? Well, if you're under 37 and don't have £30,000 to throw at a deposit, the odds are rather stacked against you. That's why the government has just launched a new scheme they say will give people a leg up onto the housing ladder. The Newbury initiative aims to tackle the chronic shortage of first-time buyers by allowing them to borrow up to 95% of a mortgage. Cathy.
Well, a lot of first-timers really struggle to raise the huge deposit they need. And here's why. The average price of a house is £161,000. And many lenders ask for a 20% deposit. So that means buyers have to find £32,000. So under the government's New Buy scheme announced today, they'd only have to pay a 5% deposit, £8,000, based on the average house price. That's because the house builder and the government will guarantee part of the mortgage in case the value of the house drops, which would expose a lender to a potential loss if it had to be repossessed. There are, however, limits to the scheme. Only 3 lenders are taking part and only 7 house builders. And it only applies to newly built houses worth up to £500,000 in England. The government also announced today a better deal for council tenants who want to buy their own homes. They can now get discounts after 5 years of up to 50%, rising over the years to a maximum £75,000. But is all of this solving the housing crisis, or simply transferring the risk to the government and the builders? Well, earlier I spoke to first-time buyer Mark Steadman. Mark Steadman, just tell me what your financial situation is roughly and how you think you're missing out at the moment on buying a house.
So at the moment, I'm in a stable job and my girlfriend and I are looking for to buy a new house. We're not homeowners at the moment. And so we're currently sort of renting a flat, and we've been looking around in terms of to see what's available. And a lot of the new houses out there at the moment just appear to be a little bit out of our reach at the moment.
Now, if you only had to get together a 5% deposit, what would that mean that you had to raise in your area? And would this new scheme help you then?
I think the 5% deposit is a good start, and I think it's achievable in terms of the sort of what we're looking at in terms of the house prices where we live at the moment. However, a lot of these new schemes are based on sort of new houses which are being built, and I think the relative value of those properties are a lot higher than sort of existing sort of houses that are in the area. So it just makes it more expensive to initially get on.
And have you found that there are already 95% mortgages available that you could take advantage of?
I've heard there's kind of 1 or 2 out there, but we haven't really looked in any detail in terms of taking that next step in terms of buying somewhere. So.
Well, also with me are Grant Shapps, the Housing Minister in Westminster, and Campbell Robb, the Chief Executive of Shelter. Grant Shapps, you heard what Mark Steadman was saying there. He's not convinced that this scheme would help him. What do you think?
I think it probably should help him. It is true that this scheme is all about new build homes, because we want it to support jobs in the economy and construction at the same time as supporting people like Mark as well to get their foot on the ladder. And actually often new homes at the moment are selling not at a premium but at a slight discount, so I was interested to hear what he had to say. But yes, it should mean that, for example, in London, rather than perhaps having to get a £60,000 deposit together, something like a £15,000 deposit would work for somebody in future. 95%
mortgages are available at the moment, so aren't you in danger of helping people who are already capable of getting a mortgage?
No, the deals that are available today are way up in excess of 5% until today. With the New Buy guarantee, what it's done is brought the deals available well under 5%, and it means that people will be able to get that foot on the ladder.
Campbell, Robb, you were nodding there on the question of affordability.
Well, it's a real concern, I think, going forward. Interest rates are very, very low and they're going to go up. We've seen a number of new buy schemes by various governments over the last 4 or 5 years, none of which have really hit the mark or taken off. And we do have a concern that whilst interest rates are low, things are being discounted, that people are being encouraged to borrow perhaps more than they can do.
Grant Shapps, by making this affordable and drawing people in, you're potentially pulling people into negative equity in the future, aren't you?
Well, the last thing any of us would want, and I'd absolutely agree with Shelter about this, is to create another sort of subprime lending boom followed by bust. But 95% mortgages operated for decades in this country without any real problems. When it goes crazy, it's when 120% of the mortgages lent, or where the mortgage companies just aren't looking properly at whether people could afford to pay back, not just with interest rates low, but with higher ones. So I think this is a great scheme today, designed to help people like Mark, and I think that people will really welcome the idea that they can get a foot on the ladder
Campbell.
again.
Of course, we'd welcome people getting a foot in the ladder, but this is just a very small scheme relative to the number of people that are in housing crises in the country. It doesn't do anything for people like Mark, who are currently really struggling in the private rented sector and seeing their rents going up and struggling, and that's why they're caught between a rock and a hard place. So, of course, it's welcome, but I think it's one of over 100 different initiatives the Minister's launched since he was made the Minister. And what we need to see is some more coordination and get more momentum going between some of these smaller initiatives.
What we're talking about today is this new buy scheme that people like Mark will benefit from, but also the right to buy and the ability to buy with a decent discount again your council house, but with a difference from the old scheme of the 1980s. The money will be taken and invested in building yet more homes for affordable rent. Campbell's right, you've got to do all these things together, and we have brought that together in a strategy. It's called the Housing Strategy. We launched it in November, and today is an important part of fulfilling
Well,
part
on that right to buy scheme, that surely is, if the money's reinvested from sales into social housing, that surely should be something you support.
I think, of course, it would be, but the thing we have to be absolutely clear, this is not a like for like. These are council houses currently with quite a low rent, with a lot of security for the people that are in them, and the government's proposing to replace them with an affordable rent scheme, which could be up to 80% of a market rent in an area with far less security for the people that get in them. So
Which
this
is
not
pricey,
it can be very pricey in London and others. So it's not a like for like replacement. And so the actual stock of very affordable for people on very low income houses will diminish. Yes, the government is replacing them, but it is not doing so necessarily for those on very low income.
Right, Shapps.
But let's just be clear, affordable rent in practice, because we've already built some homes under this scheme, this is part of the 170,000 I was just talking about, affordable rent hasn't delivered 80% of market rents. In London, it's 64.5%.
And that's still significantly more than people are paying.
No, you're right. No, absolutely. Campbell, you're absolutely right. But what people will be surprised about watching this tonight is that under the old system of council housing, and I'm talking about what existed up to very recently, when you got a council house, you keep it forever, even when you didn't need it any longer, and be able to hand it on to the next generation, even though there'd be people on the waiting list.
There are roughly 2 million people on council house waiting lists.
2 million families, 5 million people.
2 million families. That is going to exacerbate the problem, isn't it? Selling off more of these homes.
No, my argument is we've got to start looking after those people on those housing waiting lists. The old system of saying, don't worry if you don't need a social home, you can keep it forever. Going forward in the future, not for those already in those homes, going forward for the future isn't tenable.
Our first-time buyer was Mark Steadman, and that was the Housing Minister, Grant Shapps, and Shelter's Campbell Robb talking to Cathy earlier. Interested in one of these new buy loans, which I apologise for misnaming? Well, we've unpicked the details for you. Find out more on our website. Go to channel4.com/news.